of things. Hey, everybody, I'm Joe Lamb, and this is Michael Stone. And it's Monday afternoon coffee. And besides that, we're cooked.
Yeah, we are cooked. We're in a heat dome here in the Northwest. I was driving down the freeway this morning at 11 o'clock, and it was 113 degrees.
113?
113. I suddenly thought I was in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah. It's not supposed to be that way.
What are some of the things you tell your patients about heat?
Hydration and salt are important. And salt has to come before the hydration piece.
Yeah, it's really important to be aware. We often don't think about all those insensible losses we have when it's this hot. Every time we take in a breath of hot air, and we have increased insensible loss of fluid through our lungs, and the amount of fluid we lose through sweat. And so our elders especially, or many of our patients who are on blood pressure medications or things like that, it's once you start seeing your urine darkening, or you start to stand up and you're a little dizzier than normal, it's time to sit it on down and take in exactly what you're talking about, Joe, taking enough fluid and making sure you don't skimp too much on all the important salts.
Yeah. When I was in high school, Gatorade wasn't a thing yet. There was some product called, there was a heat salve called Kramer Agesic that was a little bit like Bengay. And I know Kramer made some sort of rehydration drink, but it was too expensive for the athletic department at my school. So we ended up with salt tablets, just sodium chloride tablets. And it was interesting. We never had a lot of cramps during athletic events. And 2 decades later, kids had Gatorade, and they would drink it regularly during athletic events. And I'd be on the sidelines for football games, and I'd be seeing all these kids having cramps. And it was, I think, 2 things contributed. Kids took the salt pills every day during the week back when we were taking salt pills, and they thought that instead they could drink, Gatorade on the sidelines. And one of the things that came out of that was when you drink a salted, sugary beverage and you're exercising, your gut doesn't absorb very well. So even though they were taking in the salt load and the sugar, they weren't getting it during that period of time and would see a lot more cramps. I eventually put the kids who were having issues on salt pills, and they went away.
Yeah, we always, sodium chloride or salt has certainly gotten a bad rap over the years with its association with hypertension, but there's that whole somewhat controversy that for many of our patients who are salt poor, it contributes to fatigue, it contributes to hypotension, it contributes to a whole series of symptoms, and it certainly does for our kids who are really active and are exercising, and they and losing a lot through insensible losses. And we just have to be really aware that most of the things we shouldn't be putting on labels of good or bad. We should put them in the context of function and what the individual needs. So you're exactly
Yeah.
right. In the
And
summer and in the fall for the athletes, they don't have a lot of sodium in their diet. It's a reasonable thing to consider adding some salt and along with the hydration.
yeah, and you can add salt, as to your point, as part of the diet. Like, you can be proactive. So, on the day that you're out exercising, I can remember back when I lived in DC playing golf in August, and you would change your shirt like after like 6 holes because you were soaking wet. And it's not just wet, but it's salty wet. And I would always make sure that I got salt, like when we would stop for lunch or something, but I made sure that I got my salt in a way that I would actually get it. Like, people salt French fries all the time, right? But the salt doesn't stick to the French fries. And when they're done eating French fries, you see all this salt sitting on the bottom of the plate. But if you put your ketchup down and you measure out the salt in your hand from the salt shaker and get like a half a teaspoon of salt and put it on your ketchup, and then you make sure you mop up all your ketchup, then you've actually gotten your salt. So little tricks like that.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And salt, we ended up giving kind of a bad rap when we use so much salt to cure things. True. And,
Yeah.
there's no doubt that for a while, and probably still, although I don't have the recent data on it, salt intake in the United States, it has decreased, but we have to look at it in the context of what increases your salt requirement. And, for many of our patients who are hypertensive, they actually, if they're sodium low, they actually have slightly improved blood pressure when they add back some salt. So,
yeah.
It's another one of those conundrums, Dr. Lamb, another one of those conundrums.
Well, and a big part of it is pregnant women not having salt and thus not having enough iodine. And the percentage of pregnant women who are iodine deficient, and thus putting their child at risk for thyroid disorders, is significant. So,
yeah. Well, the heat is going to last. The heat is going to last, and with this heat, we've been having some brownouts or power losses. For us, they've been almost an hour, even yesterday, and a few minutes today. And I know you have been having power outages up there too. And so, if we suddenly disappear during this half-hour afternoon coffee break, that may be a reason why.
Yep. And we won't be back next week because not only is it the 5th of July and the holiday, but Michael and I are headed to Feathered Pipe Ranch for our retreat. So the 5 days functional medicine journey in Helena, Montana. So we will see you after today in 2 weeks. I think, what we were talking about just before going live was the concept of filter, and how the filters we have on the world color what our days look like. And we talked about, waking up knowing it's going to be a hot day in the filter that we had. We were talking earlier in a slightly different context about your gratitude journal with your camera in the morning and the filter that creates for the day. And we were recognizing how much those first things we do in the morning or those first thoughts have contribute to the way we think about the rest of the day, that contribute to the way we process information, and contribute to the way we will eventually judge whether it was a good or a bad day.
No, it's exactly true, isn't it? And I'm not sure how you start your day, but when I start my day with a sudden jolt from an alarm, or I get up and the first thing I do is read news. I have a tendency to have a little more of a fight or flight sympathetic drive that truly colors my day versus awakening and slowly first taking in the surrounds. You know, if it's in that transition between night and day, the first light, the different sounds of the early day, whether it's frogs stopping to croak and birds starting to sing or chirp, whether it's the shift in temperature from the coolness and a little bit of dew at night to of the early morning. You know, it's just if we activate our senses in a gradual way, um, suddenly the filter is one of more balance and peace. And I think for many of our colleagues and for many people through time, that is part of the early meditation practices, isn't it?
It is. I mean, in many ways, what you're talking about is being mindful and not living into the distraction that Aldous Huxley talked about in Brave New World, where our entertainments, and I'm tossing news into that category, and our fears and worries and concerns, all those things distract us from what's important. And, in his book, it distracted people from picking the kind of society that they wanted to live in because they thought they had it because they were distracted. But, picking how your day's going to be based upon what you pay attention to and what you're mindful about, from those earliest decisions in the day of, taking a moment for gratitude or taking a moment for appreciation or just taking a moment to, um, you know, center and become fully aware, you know, and then kind of sets yourself up for a degree of resilience throughout the day. Herbert Benson did a study that showed impact upon blood pressure, heart rate, and cortisol response to stressful stimuli later in the day, depended upon whether people practice 10 minutes of soft belly breathing twice a day.
Yeah, isn't that was a great it was a fascinating meld, wasn't it? When you take practices that have been associated with well-being and with balance through the ages, and then put them in a study format and document the effect. I'm reminded in nearly 2000, well, more than 2000 years ago, um, one of the Chinese practices for women who were pregnant were to put the hands on their womb and sing or hum. And when and having graceful sleep. And when they did that, and they repeated those techniques recently in a study that um, looking at cortisol levels in the children where the mother practiced that during their last trimester, that the baseline cortisol levels in their babies when they were born were much lower, and the heart rate variability improved to a more healthy dynamic. The mother's blood pressure was in better range. And so these mindful techniques that have been used through the ages and may have been considered wives' tales, in all honesty, as we study them, as Herbert Benson did, and how we've been studying more and more in the mindfulness literature and research interests, we are putting a scientific explanation and cause and effect to an age-old gratitude or appreciation practices that have been associated with well-being.
Yeah. And I had a really interesting conversation about that at lunch with Bonnie McGregor from Orion Wellness up in Seattle, affiliated with the Cancer Lifeline and with the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. And Dr. McGregor is a psychologist and has been doing research. And, people look at components of, it goes back and forth. How much is stress related to cancer? How much is stress related to this? Back and forth. And the negative studies distract people from the associations, and associations sometimes have to, sometimes, the way a study is designed sometimes fails to show what you're hoping that it would show. But, like one of the good ways to look at it, though, there's not a lot of studies that do an absolutely wonderful job at showing that stress causes like cancer or various diseases. There are lots of studies that show that things specifically aimed at reducing stress, like participation in mind, body, spirit wellness programs, or participation in the Dean Ornish program, and having your group be considered a group that did therapeutic work, your small group versus a group that was dysfunctional and didn't. Those sorts of things improved your outcome. And it's an interesting way of looking at that.
No, isn't that something? I think that well, that's just exactly true. We in the mindfulness practices, incorporation of the day and the filters of the morning, whether it's concentrating on activating our senses and quieting the mind, really sets our whole sympathetic axis. And, it's interesting. While you were talking, I was reflecting on how many times when, as clinicians, we go through our day and there's certain situations that may fill us with dread or anxiety or angst, knowing that we're going to have to deal with them. And, I think one of my challenges of my day after the good challenges of my day after listening to this conversation is I want to look at my schedule for the day and pick a gratitude point for every person that I see, even before I'm going to see them.
Yeah.
And then see how that frames how receptive I am. For clinicians, so often some of the dread is not knowing how we're going to figure it out, or recognizing that we don't know what the next step is. What happens as, Lipton-Stahl said, and, enjoy every sandwich. If we can let go of all those fears, can we have a morning filter that is removing the fear filter? If we can let go of all those fears, it's his contention, Lee Lipton-Stahl, that we indeed would be left with love and caring.
Right.
And
Lee was actually the one who looked at that Ornish data and showed the impact of the difference. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us,
Yeah,
right?
I know. And his last book, Enjoy Every Sandwich, he basically highlights um, highlights many of it, his process of actively dying and knowing that the end is coming, and how he was coming to peace and enjoying each moment with a gratitude and appreciation, with an experienced or expressed love that actually became rarefied because of his known short time. And and his filter was really a filter of letting go of fear and embracing the moment.
Yeah. Creating resilience, right? Um, I mean, he was before that, I've not read that book, but thank you for the reference to it. I think it sounds interesting. But, um, um, before that, he did a lot of work with, as you said, trying to heal the healer, the wounded healer, because, you know, um, in our guild of allopathic medicine, a lot of emphasis is put on the responsibility of the practitioner to navigate that diagnosis. And if the practitioner doesn't do it, there's no one really to do it. And, you know, as opposed to like a Reiki therapist who thinks of themselves as a conduit for the energy in the world, and, that you're just opening yourself to provide the opportunity for the patient to receive. And it's kind of an interesting twist that, you know, practitioners end up being stuck on that dilemma of what to do for someone. And again, it comes down to what piece of information do we choose to listen to and what piece don't we? And how do we, what filters do we use to know what's right and wrong?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And those filters are influenced so much by our upbringing, right?
yeah, absolutely. And also by habit, because like I was really struck by your comments earlier about the weekend and you all having a family celebration and seeing people, now that the rules have changed a little bit and vaccinated people can gather and the such, the resiliency of joy bouncing back into people's lives and what that will mean for them.
Yeah, I was impressed. We had a gathering of all vaccinated people um, for a wedding, and three different events in 48 hours, in which there was spontaneous laughter, there was joy, there was some singing, there was a lot of dancing, and to be able to see expressions not masked again, to see free communing in, supportive, energetic gatherings, it suddenly seemed so foreign, and everyone was so hungry for it.
Oh,
And
absolutely. And I think
and I look
it's
forward.
our,
We all look forward to that returning.
yeah. And I think it's our ability to celebrate that creates some of that resilience and to appreciate it and be grateful for it. Um, and I think, you know, out of our resilience and our learned habits also come the way we sort information a little bit. And it
Yeah.
struck me that there are parallels in the Miami news story of the building in Surfside collapsing, that harken back to um, Henrik Ibsen's play, The Enemy of the People, and the movie Jaws, both of which shared the same plot, which was a danger in the water recognized by an educated minority being ignored by a majority who had a financial interest or some sort of commercial interest in not addressing the danger, and the outcome being not necessarily a good one. In Enemy of the People, it was a physician saying that there were these new microbes in the water, a story taking place in the late 1800s, that there were microbes in the water at the healing baths, which actually may be making some people sicker as opposed to helping them. And they ran the practitioner out of town on a rail. In Jaws, you had the sheriff who was finally able to prove it when he brought back the dead shark, that there was a danger in the water. And, in Miami, we have a similar story where it seems like a government official may have led people to cavalierly ignored a warning about a danger, not in the water, but from the water, of decomposition of concrete. And it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out eventually. What responsibility the condo association board has, what association the Surfside government, Surfside, the little city of Surfside there on the island of Miami Beach, what responsibility they have. And because it certainly seems like both a University of Florida study, almost 2 decades ago, and then the recent safety report by the engineering firm, both identified warning signals.
Well, it is. And what are the filters we use, as you say, to either not see what is obvious right in front of us, or to see what is obvious and speak up? And what are those filters that we have in our life that help us see the patterns that would help bring change in our next step, in our direction? And that's really what we're going to be part of the discussion on, speaking of journey, that we're going to have at Feathered Pipe.
Yeah. I had a conversation with someone yesterday and said, when it comes down to a matter of ego versus how a person is treated, or a matter of some sort of self-interest, the treating another person with dignity and respect always comes first. And I think that may be a filter that we could all process and use a little bit more often. Like if we're embarrassed about what we do or don't know, if we're embarrassed about how we're going to be judged, it doesn't ever justify putting someone's life at risk. I think the best physicians are the ones who say they don't know enough and it's time to get a consult when they need it, and not the consult from the pathologist afterwards.
No, that's exactly true.
So we are going to be.
Well, any closing words?
I was going to say we are going to be at Feathered Pipe next week. So, and there's still spots left. You can find details at www.josephlambmd.com or at the featheredpiperanch.com websites. We'd love to see you there with us.
Well, it's going to be a great event. And we look forward to meeting and engaging new friends and colleagues, and safe travels.
Yes, absolutely. All right, everybody, have an awesome week. We'll see you in 2 weeks, but Thursday is the last of our year-long series, Lunch and Learn, and we'll be starting over. Well, Thursday, I guess, actually is technically the 1st of July, but because of a delay, it's the last of the year-long series that was ending in June, and the new series starts on the third Thursday in July. But join us this Thursday here for a Lunch and Learn. All right, everybody. Thank you and take care.
Take care.